As you know, Audubon cares about deer management because we care about birds, other wildlife, and the habitat upon which they rely. We have been strong proponents of a more science-based approach to deer management that the Game Commission has pursued in recent years because of the well-documented impacts that decades of overabundant deer have had on forested habitats. Last June, Audubon released a report entitled Common Birds in Decline, in which we documented 40-year trends in the populations of some of our most familiar bird species. Here in the Commonwealth, we have seen a 62% drop in wood thrush numbers and a 22% decline in ruffed grouse. Each of these species rely on habitats that have been irrefutably overbrowsed by white-tailed deer outside of deer fences. Again, we care about deer because we care about birds and habitat. If you have not read the book, Deer Wars, Science, Tradition, and the Battle Over Managing Whitetails in Pennsylvania by Bob Fry, I recommend it to you. The book covers decades of conflict and bitter battles over why and how we manage deer in Pennsylvania. Today, as in the past, much of that discussion surrounds the science behind deer management. We have our questions regarding the science and methodology that underlie the current program and would like to work with the Pennsylvania Game Commission and other stakeholders to understand it better. But the bigger issue before us as hunters, conservationists, and stewards of our wildlife resource is not a question of science, but of values and goals. What is it we want deer management in Pennsylvania to accomplish? Deer are described as overabundant when they limit the abundance or occurrence of another valued resource or interfere with some ecological process or human activity. There is broad agreement within the scientific community that forests throughout Pennsylvania are still in a seriously degraded ecological condition as a result of high deer densities and impacts. An independent evaluation by a team of scientists on behalf of the Forest Certification Council found that deer have decimated the diversity and sustainability of flora and fauna on the state forest system. It will take time and lower deer densities to fix these problems created by decades of attempting to satisfy the insatiable desire of some hunters for more deer than landowners, farmers, communities, and resource professionals want. In 2002, the Pennsylvania Game Commission assembled what it determined were the state's deer stakeholders to identify what the goals for deer management in Pennsylvania should be. The 27 individuals selected by the PGC represented the interests of sportsmen, agriculture, forestry, environmental conservation, urban-suburban municipalities, the legislature, and the Game Commission. This independently facilitated stakeholder group identified 6 goals, ranking them in order of their importance. Balancing deer impacts with healthy forest ecosystems was ranked as the most important deer management goal for Pennsylvania, followed by number 2, providing public and private landowners with the deer management tools they need to achieve their land use objectives, improving and maintaining a healthy deer herd, increasing recreational opportunities involving deer, increasing citizen understanding of healthy ecosystems and deer herds, and reducing deer-human conflicts. During the same year, Audubon, Pennsylvania commissioned an independent statewide survey of the general public across Pennsylvania, asking citizens to rank deer management goals in the order of their priority. Managing deer to promote healthy, sustainable forest ecosystems was the number 1 goal identified for deer management by the public and by hunters, followed by minimizing conflicts with humans. Both of these efforts suggest that the most important deer management goal for the people of Pennsylvania is for deer to be managed to allow healthy forest ecosystems and reduce deer-human conflicts. Neither group identified as a top goal providing more deer for those hunters who complain that there are too few deer. Surveys done independently by the Game Commission and Audubon demonstrate that Pennsylvanians overwhelmingly support using hunters to manage deer. They do not, however, support mismanaging the deer herd to satisfy the desire of some hunters to have more deer than the habitat can responsibly support or that landowners or communities want. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has a long history of confusing the deer management tool, hunters, with the deer management goal, that of meeting the public's economic, health, and ecological needs and expectations for deer management. Pennsylvania deer hunters have more opportunities to hunt deer today than at any time since the Game Commission was organized in 1895 and continue to kill over 350,000 deer each year, year after year. We are sustainably killing more deer today than 20 years ago during a time period many hunters today describe as the good old days. Recreational hunting is the tool for meeting the public's goal. It is not the goal itself. One of the primary tools now available to landowners to reach their goals is DMAP, the Deer Management Assistance Program. The Kinzua Quality Deer Cooperative, or KQDC, a group of forest land managers, hunters, tourism interests, and biologists working on 74,000 contiguous acres in northwestern Pennsylvania, has attributed improved forest health to a strategic, deliberate use of DMAP. KQDC participants report that most antlerless deer are harvested on the first 2 days of the rifle season, supporting the need to maintain a 2-week concurrent rifle season that allows recreational hunters to take either sex throughout the 2 weeks. Preliminary results of a multi-year study by the Game Commission and Pennsylvania Cooperative Fish and Wildlife Research Unit at Penn State on female white-tailed deer survival would indicate that the deer many hunters claiming are not in the woods are really just avoiding those same hunters. The study on over 250 deer in the big woods of north-central Pennsylvania and the Ridge and Valley section of south-central PA indicate that the survival rates for the year exceed 80%. Among the deer in the study, hunters have failed to remove even 15% of the population. Again, this supports the case for more, not fewer, days and opportunities for recreational hunters to pursue these deer if managing for forest health is the goal. DMAP and any other tool, including season lengths, will take time to work and should not be altered without scientific analysis and justification. A year ago, the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources released a report on the impact of deer browsing on woody trees and shrubs in the state forest system and the ability of those species to regenerate. System-wide, the study revealed only 24% of study plots with desirable regeneration and 44% of plots with no woody regeneration. According to the study, this, quote, indicates that browsing has not been down long enough for a widespread regeneration process, unquote. DCNR is finalizing its data for this year and has opened its methodology to peer review, demonstrating a noteworthy commitment to a science-based approach to resource management. Attempting to respond to demands by some hunters for the number of deer they would like to see has proven over and over again to be a failed and imprudent policy. Yet once again there are proposals to go down that path by shortening antlerless seasons, reducing antlerless allocations, and turning hunters from deer managers operating in the public interests to recreationists exploiting a public resource. All this is happening without a firm scientific footing. Please know that the most vocal critics of the deer management program have not supported their arguments with credible science. Notably, one area of the deer management program that has been subject to peer review, the harvest estimate methodology, passed an independent scientific peer review in the Journal of Wildlife Management. We know that the Legislative Budget and Finance Committee and the General Assembly are interested in an audit of the deer program, and we ask you and your colleagues to ensure that any such analysis be done professionally, in full view of the public, and with adherence to scientific principles. I would like to end my remarks by reciting from a letter submitted by Audubon, Pennsylvania Federation of Sportsman Clubs, and other hunting, agricultural, and land use management organizations earlier this legislative sessions. Quote, "At this critical time in the history of wildlife management in Pennsylvania, our organizations join you in your desire to better understand how decisions are being made by the Game Commission. While the different parties interested in this topic may disagree about the goals and direction of Pennsylvania's deer management program, we can all agree that natural resource management decision-making should be made in the public eye and informed by science rather than emotion. To that end, we are asking you and your colleagues to resist the temptation to vote on bills that would legislatively change the structure of the Commission or the current deer management program, or legislate wildlife seasons and bag limits. Good public policy requires that the public have the opportunity to examine the methods and techniques which underlie decisions. Without an understanding of and faith in the process, skeptics will always be able to question the validity of certain outcomes," end quote. Thank you for this opportunity to support and speak for a science-based approach to deer management.
Thank you for your testimony. I'll start down the far left. Does Chairman Fontana have any questions? Senator Dinniman?
What is your suggestions on that, by the way? Even though we're straying aside from eagles for a second.
Sure.
I mean, from deer for a second.
I should say that the reason it was removed from the federal list shows the real success that we've had in federal policies and improving water quality. The one thing that bald eagles are attracted to is good water. So the fact that you've got the bald eagles in southeastern PA and north central, northwestern Pennsylvania says we're doing something right on water quality.
Absolutely, which we've worked on, and the eagles were near where your Audubon Society headquarters is.
Right. So, but in terms of changing the federal the federal standards that were amended recently, I mean, the fact that they are still a protected species under Pennsylvania law, the fact that there is the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act, I would agree with Executive Director Rowe that there are mechanisms and systems in place that you could work with the Game Commission to try to protect the nesting habitats that you're concerned about.
Excellent. And on the deer management concerns. I remember, I believe you were there, and where we saw the difference in such visual form at Valley Forge National Park, where there was one area that had been encased with a fence, where you saw a forest that was alive and well, and the other area you almost saw nothing from this forest. So what you're saying, if I understand you correctly, is that everyone could end up being happy. If we take a more scientific approach, not only do we save the habitat, but in the end, we also use the hunter to do what the hunter is best at doing, and that is hunting, and that in turn adds to it. So, what are you specifically asking the Game Commission to do? What is the specific change? Is it just simply changing the scientific basis upon which they conduct their policies? What specifically do you want?
We're not asking the Game Commission to change anything. What we're asking for today is, knowing that there's a sentiment on the part of the General Assembly to examine the deer management program, to do so in an open, transparent, and scientific way, and let the science suggest where we should go, rather than legislatively changing anything within the Commission.
So you're not stating that you're necessarily happy with these programs, because you started off by explaining the problems that exist.
What I've said is that I don't think we've given them long enough to work. It's going to take a long time. It took us 100 years to get into the pickle that we are with the habitat conditions in Pennsylvania, and it's not just going to take 5 or 7 years to get out of it in terms of forest regeneration is concerned. So what we're asking for is give the system a chance to work. Let's evaluate it with good science, and then make our determination about whether things should be changed or not.
What you then have to inform the members of the General Assembly of is what you mean by good science. I mean, we're not experts in everything, all right?
Good science, in our opinion, would be peer-reviewed and open to public scrutiny.
Okay, so that's a help in the right direction. But what you're going to have to also do, it seems to me, Tim, is give us some really, as you've done in your bibliography, is to give some examples of that science, and how that, pure good science is one thing. The implementation of that good science is a very different matter. So it has to not only be good science, but good science that can be implemented in a way that allows for that public disclosure and allows for the type of results that you want.
Agreed.
But I get my final concern here is, and if I could use this by analogy, in our county, in Chester County, when I was commissioner, we always said we wanted to have good science with water resources. So we had a 20-year contract with U.S. Geological Survey. The problem was they came out with all their results. No one could understand the damn word they were saying. And then when we asked the local supervisors to implement it, it couldn't be implemented. What you have to do, and I know you're serious about this, is you have to have the science. You have to have a way to be implemented, but you also have to have a way that everyone can understand what you're doing. If you don't have that, you're not going to have the transparency, and you're not going to have the public support of what you're doing. So it's incumbent, it seems to me, for the Audubon Society to assist, not just in identifying science, not just in having science that can be implemented, but having it so that it can be understandable. Because there's a disconnect that exists between science and public policy, and until we're able to connect that disconnect, we're not going to get anywhere.
I agree with you, and I'm happy to report that in your district, we're right now working with the Willistown Conservation Trust.
Absolutely.
To monitor habitat conditions on the property, to monitor bird breeding success in those habitats, and then correlate that with the deer program that we have in place. So we absolutely believe in good methodology, and we believe in communicating it well, and in a way that's understandable to the public. I'd also like to mention, I'm anticipating what some of the future testimony may be with regard to other impacts on our forests. Certainly deer aren't the only impacts, but please keep in mind when you hear about the impacts of acid rain on our forests in Pennsylvania, that acid rain does not fall selectively outside of a deer fence and not fall inside of a deer fence. So our forests are clearly impacted by acid deposition, by other factors, but when you look across the Commonwealth, the common denominator in the lack of regeneration, again, inside versus outside of a deer fence, are deer numbers and not acid rain.
Well, we also have the testimony from the Director of the Game Commission about the difficulty of maintaining our forests when we asked a question about harvesting of wood. I support what you're doing. I know the wonderful work you do in Willistown, but I just really don't believe you're going to get the support of the General Assembly or the support of the public until you connect science and policy in a way that we can all understand it.
Thank you. And I'd welcome the chance to work with you or staff to let us know what's the best way to communicate that science to you.
Good point.
Thank you, Dr. Dinnerman. Senator Robbins, Senator Eichelberger.
Morning, Doctor.
Morning.
Two things. First of all, how far apart do you think what you're advocating is from the current practice of the Game Commission today?
Again, we've absolutely supported the direction that the Game Commission's gone, and believe that they're sincere in trying to take a more science-based approach. We think they're absolutely going in the right direction.
Great. And I can't resist, since you guys have been on record with the windmill issue. Are you familiar with the Game Commission's regulations on that? Or are you? I haven't seen them. So, what do you think of those regulations? You think that's adequate?
Well, first of all, they're not regulations. They're a voluntary agreement that wind companies sign voluntarily. And we did provide comments on the methods that are used. We think it's a great step in the right direction. We think part of the issue that we have right now in Pennsylvania is that wind is being developed at such a rapid pace that we don't understand what the impacts of those turbines going up on our ridges and fragmenting our habitats are going to have on bird populations. So we think it's a step in the right direction. We would actually advocate for even additional pre-construction site assessment. In the Game Commission's agreements, there's requirements for pre-construction monitoring of a year. I believe it's a year. I'd be happy to be corrected. We would suggest that because of the way avian species vary from year to year, that we think there should be additional years of pre-construction site assessment. But to answer your question, absolutely, we think they're very much a step in the right direction and would support other efforts to come to some agreement on how siting criteria should be developed in Pennsylvania.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, and we'll hear from our next testifiers.
Thanks.